Now I'm turning on the video and we'll get started momentarily. Okay, so you're going to ask the first question a brief moment after I clap hands, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Do you remember your father's parents?
My grandfather, Louis Bader, died on the eve of Rosh Hashanah in 1944, 4 years before I was born. My grandmother, Bertha Holder, died in 1951, before I was 3 years old. So unfortunately, I have no memories of my grandparents.
Did your father often speak about his parents?
My father almost never spoke to his children about our grandparents. There were no stories about their lives in Eastern Europe, no stories about their passage to America, no stories about their early struggles on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and no stories about their lives in Auburn, in the borough of Queens, where they raised 3 children.
How do you account for your father's reticence?
I suppose it was because my father was a very practical man who saw little value in the past. He was firmly focused on the present or the future. There was little room in my father's heart for sentiment or nostalgia.
Weren't you curious to learn about your grandparents?
I was always curious, but for some reason, the subject of my grandparents never seemed to come up. Unfortunately, it wasn't until after my father died that I was determined to find out more about them. What possessed 2 young people, barely out of their teens, to leave the country of their birth, their family and friends, for a place where they didn't even speak the language?
How did you learn about your grandparents after your father had died?
My search began in the late 1990s, before the internet became widely available, and genealogical research had to be done the old-fashioned way, by visiting archives in person. So I went to the New York Public Library on 5th Avenue and to a branch of the National Archives on Varick Street in Lower Manhattan in search of some basic facts.
What information, aside from their names, enabled you to identify records about your grandparents?
A passing comment that my mother made one night at the dinner table made a lasting impression. She recalled that my father's parents had once lived in a small town called Atania. She didn't say where this was exactly, and she probably didn't know. But in sober tones, she told her children never to forget the name of this place. Although we never spoke about it again, Atania became the key to answering the many questions I had about Louis and Bertha Bader. Okay, you can take a break now.